Thank you for that. I
Oh,
knew it pulling in. I go, I think
absolutely.
that's probably dad in front of us. So I
Yes,
loved that.
yes. Oh, oh, perfect.
Yes.
Good.
Had a thing to love right now. I loved that.
Oh, yes.
So thank you for being in front. I'm sure you had a
Oh, absolutely. Perfect. Love it.
Where you want
Together.
We did the same thing. The first person I met.
Oh, yeah, that was. Thanks for coming, you too. Sorry, the circumstances.
I haven't seen you.
Yeah.
This is wit. Very witty. So are you.
But it's not gonna be like.
Very sweet.
I literally found.
Probably.
But there's.
Just graduated. Yes. You remember?
What's your name?
Remember me on my least favorite.
I know, you look great. You look great. Yeah. You looked.
And she was,
Say hi. What? That inspired. That inspired. I have no Dan.
that's a process.
I do too. Tell me your L.
That's my daughter.
She really could make that. I like two.
I know, I'm talking to
So I went right
He was a great guy. He was.
I didn't know how to do
I thought he had a sense of humor. He's a great guy. Kind guy. So, very. Anything I can do. I'll be sure.
Yes.
I'm sorry. You know what? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
You I'm not where you're at. I'm saying I'm that same.
For different levels.
You're a high.
No, I know that. I know. I thought you meant recently. Wait a minute. Of course I talked to you. Of course I've talked to you about.
Yeah.
No, of course I.
I'm so sorry about it. I love your husband.
But you don't know
Yeah. This is my boyfriend, Dennis.
I was from first grade.
Don't take my grandchildren.
Cherry.
That's my.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, yes. So I have
She's doing better.
Thank you.
He always.
Stories about your mom and dad.
Excuse me just a second. Haven't seen you guys in so long.
We missed our birthdays. Our
Good seeing you.
Your mom was like,
Yeah, but still good seeing you. It's beautiful. Yes, I'm sorry.
hi, Alex. To meet you. Kate. A couple of years. Oh.
Last year, so I had Sunday morning.
Oh.
I did 3 last.
Different.
Everything.
Oh, rocks. You know what I was. I couldn't believe it about he was in the marriage. That's how. Because she was working, somehow she was in the business. Wow. And that's. Well, these two have their birthdays are one day.
I'm not
And we had our very first like date at their house for New Year's Eve.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah.
we played some very exciting games.
Lots of.
And I felt bad for these guys because the questions were very personal.
Just to
Yeah.
hear them, just to.
Good.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, Cindy.
Right. Yeah.
What?
Oh.
Well, that's good.
Oh.
Oh, yeah. It's weird. We've had cold weather. Right. Right. Well, it's great. And we'll go. Yeah, we'll try to see you guys out. I haven't. Good. Doing good. Yeah, doing good. My brother didn't make it out very good at 2 back was
Just get chilly. I honestly think you're right. Maybe it's
yeah. So it's awesome. It's a great place. Like, it is. It's a true like 4 hours.
I've been trying with the hockey.
Yes.
Nice one. Really good. Yeah.
Good and bad.
I did
Yes.
not.
Yeah.
We.
Yes. And now you're friends with place.
No. It was. We actually saw it. But it was quite.
No, but that's
Because my mom
Yeah.
nice to see you.
That's just how it goes. They haven't made it. They haven't. They haven't made any decision.
No.
Yeah. I have
Oh,
mentioned,
yeah.
I mentioned to you too. So maybe
Oh,
South Bay.
I better put on that. So you played well. Mexico is inexpensive. Yeah, it's,
nice. You said that many times.
we talked about this. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's crazy.
I have my brother. Seriously. Did you read? He looks just like thanks. He lives in Salt Lake and then he works out here. So but he also manages. So or no. Oh, what do you do there? I'm sorry. He drank a lot, but it was mostly wine. That. Like so something like
It's based on the Americans.
Oh. Oh, okay. All right.
Well, that's the first item.
You might be on the list. I don't know. Yeah. You guys need to go. We should go one by one. You want to sit by mom? You want to sit on Grammy's lap? You want to sit here? I'll just go with.
Next, the other behind the scenes.
Yep, right by you, okay?
You are. You have to go right here. So I'm gonna sit right there. Sit on the edge.
Uh-oh.
Just a friendly reminder to silence your cell phones for the service.
Bruchim haba'im b'shem Adonai. Blessed are each and every one of you. We've come out here, and we are here to pay our last respects for Ed Steinberg, as well as, of course, to express our condolence, our sympathy, and our love for Helene and for Cindy and Linda and Michael and the whole family. As the family looks around, they can see a semicircle of loved ones. And there are others who are online who can't be here in person. And they too were given PDFs of this service. And the whole intention is that every one of you who've been friends with Ed and Helene for all these years and loved ones of the family, that your voices too are included, because that's how he was. He was a part of community, he was a part of your lives and you of his. And so what I wanted to do is to invite each of you to share your voices so they can be heard over the wind. But whatever is broadcast is not nearly as important as to what they get to hear with their ears, and the hugs that you give, and the knowing glances that each of us have lost a good neshama, a good soul. Traditional begin with a prayer from the 16th Psalm. Shaviti Adonai l'nagdi tamid, ki mimina bal lemot, lachen samach lebi v'yagel kavodi. Ach b'sari yishkon lebetach, ki lo ta'azov nafshi l'shol, lo titen chasikcha lirot shachat, dorieni orach chayim, so b'samachot et panecha, me'imot b'mincha netzach. It says, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, and I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult, and my soul rejoices, my being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Ed was not unaware of what he faced after the heart attacks and the procedures that he had, and that took from him that strength, that vitality. He was not happy in that hospital room. He knew what he was facing. So how can then we begin the service with a recitation of the 16th Psalm that says, happiness will long endure? Because when you visited him, inevitably one of the kids or family or friends would come by, and he perked up and he chatted and he shared and he joked, and he knew how blessed he was. He knew all that he fought for, all that he created together with his beloved Helene of almost 63 years, that it was a goodness and a blessing that would continue even after he was gone. He was not afraid of death. Didn't want it, but he was not afraid. And that was a gift he gave to his family, to say, I'm going to be with you, and he will smile upon us. And so it is. As we begin on this first page, let us think of the ways in which we will continue to remember him. We read responsibly. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember him. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we will remember him. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember him. The 23rd Psalm is on page 2. In Hebrew, it expresses, Mizmor David Adonai ro'i lo aksar, v'nodeshi yarbitzeni, amei menachot yanchileni nafshi yoshevei, yancheni b'magalei tzedek l'ma'an shemo, gam ki elek b'geit mavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtacha me hema yanachamoni, ta'arok l'panai, shochan neged zorai, v'shanta b'shem roshi kosil rovaya, ach tov b'chesed yedefone kol yemei chayai, Shafti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. In English, let us say, a psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, and I shall not want. God enables me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. God restores my soul and guides me in paths of righteousness for the sake of the divine. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. The changing of the seasons are experienced in some parts of this country with some expected changes in temperature and sunshine. And in Denver, we get all 4 seasons, perhaps in a single week. Our ancestors said that's how it is with our lives. Each chapter is like a season that comes and passes. It says, it says, as we read together, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting, a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping, a time for laughing, a time for grieving and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for refraining from embraces, a time for seeking, a time for losing, a time for keeping, a time for letting go, a time for tearing, a time for sowing, a time for silence, and a time for speaking. The time for tearing was experienced just right before the service as we gathered, and we experienced the ritual of kriya. Literally means tearing. In the old days, they would take your lapel or your coat or your pocket, and they would tear that because people had a day codes and they would wear that. Now our wardrobes are a little bit more substantial, so we more often than not put a ribbon on that is torn. And if you look closely, Michael and Cindy and Linda, they have it over their hearts, and Helene and everyone else on the right-hand side of their chest. When a child loses a parent, it's considered to be the most difficult of all the losses. And indeed, the Kaddish we recite, and we'll recite it at the end of this service, it's called the Kaddish Yatom, the Orphan's Kaddish, because that's how we feel when we lose a parent. And so there's that time for tearing, and that's going to be experienced for much of this day. And at the end, when we come back to the family's home, to Cindy's home, Dan, and we share Shiva, and we have a little prayer, and we are able to share your stories and memories. That will be a part of the sowing, of the healing. On page 3, we read this passage, which also speaks of the sacred journey that each of us are on. We say, birth is the beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat. Until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death is our destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death, to life everlasting. Each of the kids will share. There was been debate as to who was going first, but we're going to have Linda go first, and then Cindy, and then Michael.
So all of you love my dad, because to know my dad was to love my dad. And I just want to say thank you so much, Jeff, for teaching us about family, honesty, integrity, and just being such a wonderful man. So funny, so humble, and so kind. And I know I'll never forget you, and I'll always love you, Dad, until I see you again. Thank you all for coming. I forgot my speech, so I'm going to do my best to remember it. What I wrote in the middle of last night was things about my dad that I don't know if you know, but the first thing is he loves coconut cake. He asks for it every birthday, and he always calls before and says, "Have you made it yet? Have you made it yet?" The other thing he loves is fruitcake, which no one likes, but he loves it. I don't know. Other things about my dad is he was a great storyteller, and he would tell stories over and over and over again. He must have told the story about me going to college and asking him to buy me a bottle of rum because it was I was 18 and 19 was drinking age. And I begged him to buy me a bottle of rum because I would be 19 the next day because drinking age in Arizona was 19. So he used to tell that story all the time. Whenever he talked about, my dad was very bright, and he could tell you about World War I, World War II, and battles fought, and he would give you dates and names, and he knew it all. But my favorite was when he talked about Eleanor Roosevelt. And he would, anytime someone talked about Eleanor Roosevelt, he would always say this. From Franklin Delano Roosevelt's point, he would say, "I've been in war, and I've been in Eleanor, and I prefer war." All the time. Anyway, to end, I wanted to say, my dad, with all of the kids and grandkids, he used to always go up to them when he first saw them, especially the little ones. And this is Bryson. This is his great grandson. And what did he do when he first saw you, Bryson? He said, "I want to check your ears to make sure you're okay." So what did he do? He went, "What do you do?" And then, beep. And that's how he knew he was okay.
Get this out real quick. Speech. Short and sweet. Okay, so one of the greatest things about Papa is that he was around. 86, he lived a full, long, beautiful life, and I think he'd tell you the same. I was fortunate enough to get to ask him so many questions about life or about taxes. He was pretty good at both. He was definitely someone I always went to for advice. Okay. He would give the best advice. Our conversations were always great, unless it was over a meal. And in that case, you didn't know really what he was saying because he had so much food in his mouth every time he tried to talk. And Uncle Mike, I remember he said it the best one time. We were all talking. He was telling one of his stories, and Uncle Mike looks at him and says, "Hey, Dad, why don't you put another bite of food in your mouth and then try to tell your story while his mouth is full of food?" So he taught me so many life lessons. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, he was the best man I've ever known. There's so many childhood memories with him. Whether it was trips he took Sarah and I on, throwing the football with me in the backyard, playing baseball with me in the backyard. I still remember when I was young, very young, and he would watch college football or NFL, and he'd be screaming at the TV, "Go, you mother, go!" I'd say, "Go, mother, go," and you know, half the time it's like, well, I knew Papa's athletic, Uncle Mike's extremely athletic. I didn't know his mom was that athletic. So, whether it was college or NFL, she was on. She was playing. I didn't have a good way. I was thinking of a way to sum up and write everything down as far as like how to finish the speech, but I couldn't think of a proper way outside of, just saying, I love you and I've always looked up to you and by far the best man I've ever known.
Oh, man. It's crazy the thoughts that kind of come through your head when you're finally here. You think about what you're going to say, and then you get here. And, I was reminded that my Nan and Pop are not too far from here right now. They're over that way, and I think he knows at this point, but he's moving in with his in-laws. The timing of my dad's death, the rabbi talked about, how my dad was and how, it was touch and go for a number of times, but I just can't help think that my dad died Saturday morning, April 1st. And at that point in time, the Rockies were 2-0 and in first place in the National League West. And I think he had a pretty good feeling that was about as good as it was going to get. And any baseball fans know that they've lost their last two. So may his memory be a blessing. It's a statement that mourners often hear. It's certainly something I've said to others at a time of loss. And these offerings I've always appreciated as something that could provide solace to the mourner, something that spoke to the connection they had to the deceased. That would hopefully impart a source of comfort to the physical and emotional connection that was now no longer possible. In recent weeks, I've been thinking a lot about this comment. May his memory be a blessing. I've been thinking about it a lot more deeply for a couple of reasons. First, the relationship I had with my father in this plane of existence was reaching its end. Our frequent conversations, sharing news about my life, my kids' lives, and my continual leaning on him for advice that only he could provide would soon be replaced by loss. What I would have left would be his memory. As everyone here knows, my father's life was often enriched by his past memories, particularly his nostalgia for his childhood. Growing up in Raleigh, my dad's childhood memories of all things Carolina ran deep. He stayed close to his childhood friends throughout his life. His lifelong best friend, Donnie Stein, the other half of the 1-2 Jew Boy Punch, George Calmanides, Carol Glenn, Pete Pagatas. They kept the streets safe in their childhood during World War II, and thanks to their efforts, there is no record of any Nazis ever reaching Boylan Heights or his childhood home on Cutler Street. He shared memories of attending Cheder at Beth Meyer, which is a conservative shul that his father helped to found, which is still in existence today in Raleigh. He learned to sail at Camp Moorhead in Atlantic Beach. He attended historic Hugh Morrison High School prior to spending his junior and senior years at Farragut Academy in Florida. He loved playing football until an ACL injury made it impossible. He was an avid NC State Wolfpack fan, both football and basketball. And the South would also influence his dietary tastes. Carolina barbecue. No, Dad, don't worry, Dad. I won't forget the slaw. My Krispy Kreme donuts and other Carolina-centric places were all spoken of with the fondness, generally reserved only for a restaurant with a 3-star Michelin rating. After high school, he attended college at CU, ultimately graduated from DU with a focus in finance. After college, he joined the Army Reserves, initially stationed at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. After the reserves and while interviewing for a job at Lerner Shops, my dad first met the woman he would marry and ultimately embark on an amazing 62-year-old journey, which would include 3 kids, 5 grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids. He started doing books for Meyer and Sullivan. Later, he would join the trust department at First National Bank of Denver, attending banking school programs at SMU and the University of Wisconsin. While my dad had a good career in the trust departments of these banks, it was clear that his professional ambitions were beyond this. He studied at night for the CPA exam and ultimately launched his own business with a career that would span over 35 years. His dedication to work and how hard he worked, especially during tax season, has inspired my work ethic. Staying fit was an important part of my dad's life, and He was an early adopter of jogging in 1969, long before it was popular. Sporting gargantuan headphones while usually listening to big band music, he would run countless loops up and down Xanthi Street, rarely venturing off. He would also do the occasional race and always share his strategy, which was always the same. Find a cute tush, try to stay behind it. It was this act that would save his life and enable him to live as long as he did. I'm of course referring to the fitness that came from running, not following a cute tush, but of course it could be the latter. We just don't have the data. We all know my dad loved his football. He was one of the first season ticket holders for the Broncos, traveling to watch him play in the Super Bowl against the Giants. After the loss to the Redskins in the following Super Bowl, they sold the season tickets and my birthright. I'm not bitter. He also loved college football, and Saturdays were filled with games. Of course, he supported the Buffs. He'll be watching excitedly this season on the big boy we had installed in the casket. He just has to learn how to operate the remote. Dad loved reading the newspaper. He had an intricate sorting routine of its sections that bordered on obsessive. His favorite read was in the backyard on a Sunday afternoon with a glass of scotch. He was a history buff, particularly with respect to the Civil War and World War II. In that vein, he had an amazing knowledge of trivia. He loved classic movies and comedies. He could recall episodes from our show of shows, Mel Brooks movie quotes, and of course, he was fluent in Seinfeld. He carried on his Jewish traditions and imparted them to his children. He was a founding member of Temple Sinai. Family gatherings for the holidays with family and friends were always enhanced by Dad. With Passover coming up, he'll be sorely missed, especially at the part of the Seder when Rabbi Akiva is mentioned. As my dad would always say when he was, Rabbi Akiva, my man. Aside from his childhood buddies, he developed another group of close-knit friends from my mom's childhood relationships with a potluck group. While sadly diminished in numbers, this amazing group of loving friends created tight bonds and numerous special memories which enriched his life. I want to thank all in this group for the love and support you've shown me and my family at this time. Of all the things my dad loved, he loved nothing more than his family. He was a devoted and loving husband to my mom for over 62 years. In recent discussions with a person from palliative care, they asked me to describe my dad. One of the things I said was that I knew he went through hard times and he always fought through them. And the individual asked my dad, "What got you through those hard times?" Without hesitation, he said, "My wife." This connection and adoration my dad and my mom was something that I saw over and over again in my life. They shared much more than the raising of 3 kids and made certain to spend quality time together. They loved to travel. They went on some amazing trips across Europe, Asia, Africa. It was an amazing journey. As a father, the love and limitless support he showed his children is something that I will never be able to express an appropriate amount of gratitude. It represents such an aspirational level that in my personal daily prayers, I ask God that I can provide for my children as well as he provided for me. Having said that, the preferential treatment he has shown to his grandchildren makes me feel like I'm getting the short end of the stick. For his family, Ed Steinberg was more than a husband, a father, a grandfather, or even a great-grandfather. He was a super fan. His pride for all his family was almost insufferable. He would absolutely beam with joy and excitement at the news of every deed or accomplishment, like a Jewish grandmother on steroids. There's a lot more that I could share. So many stories, many that his friends have heard from him on countless occasions. So many memories, so many blessings. While this satisfies one aspect of may his memory be a blessing, there is much more to this. As a parent, one thing has become clear to me is that memory is ever evolving. I had a conversation with Rabbi Mark Soloway this morning about this very topic. He said that often when congregants attend yard sites and share words about their parents, the memories they had for them was different from even the prior year. This is true with me, as the appreciation of my father has only grown as I've come to have a greater understanding of his lived experience. In her book, Here All Along, Sarah Hurwitz captures this very well. I'm quoting, "May his memory be a blessing. This idea used to strike me as a consolation afterlife notion. one to which you resigned yourself if you couldn't talk yourself into believing in one or more of reassuring options. But then I learned about the scientific research indicating that recalling a memory is not like looking at a photograph, which is unchanging. Rather, each time we access a memory, our brains actually alter it in some way. This isn't surprising. As we grow and change, so does our understanding of past events. When we were teenagers, our memories of our parents making us go to bed early when we were younger may have been tinged with annoyance. She goes on to say, but when we recall those memories as adults, we understand that our parents' bedtime rules reflected their loving concern for our well-being. Our brains may tweak those memories, transforming them into happy ones flooded with affections. So while our parents may be deceased, our memories of them aren't just static snapshots that pop up in our brains, but a way of continuing to actively engage with them long after they're gone. I find these notions to be very beautiful and comforting, but lately, and sadly, the blessing of memory has taken on a different construct for me and my family. If the blessing of memories is what we have after a loved one departs, what then for those whose ability to sustain those memories is diminishing? How are they able to receive these blessings of memory? Bear with me on this one, guys. The answer is, I don't know. And I don't want to mark this occasion with any more sadness, but it's something that I've been wrestling with, trying to find a positive spin. I was recently listening to a podcast featuring Oded Rochavi, a professor of neurobiology at Tel Aviv University. He spoke about his research and how experience shapes genes, and remarkably, how some memories of experiences could be passed via genes to offspring through RNA molecules. If this is the case, the memories would have to be imprinted in our genes before being passed on. Granted, I'm not a scientist, but having faith in a benevolent creator that works in ways we will never understand, at least in this plane of existence, and with a religion and tradition that's foundation embraces loving kindness, I do find solace in this. And if the sourcing of memories is beyond the tapping of the brain's recollection, but is somehow entrenched in the shaping of genes through experiences, I have no doubt that the memories we have and the influences become part of our genetic makeup and who we are. Whether it was a deed of kindness, a laugh, the imparting of wisdom, or a selfless act of love, I do believe all these things run deeper than the often ephemeral nature of memories. So, while our memories of my dad are indeed a blessing, I believe that the ineffable and ingrained impact of our connected experience will ultimately sustain and stay with us in ways that we will never truly be able to appreciate. And with that belief for me and my family, and for you as friends, I can say with confidence that in my dad's life, he has blessed us all beyond his memories and in so many other ways. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Michael. You'll hear in about a moment how that concept of not just memory, but the neshama, the soul, that is bound up with the living, is an integral part of Judaism. We've heard, of course, from Cindy and Michael and Linda and Colton on behalf of the grandkids, Sarah and Olivia, Elena and Noah, and great grandkids. One of them tried to escape earlier. That was Haley, I think. Hallie and Bryson was cute enough right here with his ears. And also online, I know I wanted to mention Rabbi Zwerin, who certainly adored Ed and Helene. You guys were part of the establishment of Temple Sinai and along its journey as well. And he sends his love. And I know also online, Erwin Gelfen. And I know that Adele is here. And when I was with Ernie, with Erwin yesterday, most of the conversation was not about him in the hospital, but was about his loving friend, Ed. And so I know that Erwin's watching also. I want to get to a memory that I think each of us shares. Because each of us at a time of Passover, we gather, and it's not just the people who are there, but every single one of us think about those who used to be there. And that Seder plate from a Zaidi, and that Kiddush cup from a Zaidi, or a matzah cover from a Bobby, and the stains that were in the Haggadah from one or the other. A table crowded with good dishes, glasses of wine shimmering next to platters of relatively strange foods, things we probably only eat once a year. Gefilte fish, charoset, chopped liver. We might want it more than a couple of times a year, but the doctors say, and the gout also reaffirms, that's not what you should eat more often than once. Parsley and salt water, bowls of red and white horseradish, and varying opinions as to which one is hotter. And of course, stacks of matzah, lechem oni, the bread of affliction, whose name only truly becomes apparent after a few days of indulgence. On Wednesday night, we will gather for Passover Seders to eat those symbolic foods with family and friends. We will read from the Haggadah, the story of our people's redemption from slavery and oppression. And if that's all we do, dayenu, it would be enough. But we will also tell our own stories, and we will recall the losses and setbacks that our modern families had to overcome. We will marvel at the spiritual strength and the sheer force of will and determination that helped our loved ones persevere. And if that's all we do, dayenu, it would be enough. But we will also make sure that the kinder and the kinderskinder, our children and our children's children, will feel the nurturing strength of love and faith and wisdom and humor and the all-important act of telling our families' stories. And if that's all we do, dayenu, it would be enough. And yet, on this coming Passover, we will also pause and sigh. We'll recall those who don't sit with us. Their absence is harsher than the hottest bitter herb. There is no dayenu, for there is nothing that is enough to complete the sense of loss and grief, except perhaps a deep appreciation of a life well lived. So let us do what our people have always done. Tell their stories. Find comfort in the knowledge that as long as we remember to tell their stories, as long as we recall their strength and wisdom, as long as we remember how very much they loved us and we them, then they will continue to be a part of our lives. On Shabbat morning, the first day of April, our beloved Ed passed away. His long, difficult struggle with failing health was finally over. Now it is up to us to recall the stories that capture his gentle sweetness, his kindness, his intelligence, and his joyous enthusiasm for life. As we are about to lower the casket, Feldman's has provided for us earth from not just Israel, but from Jerusalem, Mount of Olives. We conclude our Passover Seder by saying, B'shana haba'ah Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Well, there will always be a piece of Jerusalem that is resting next to Ed. And after the family places some of this on his casket, then we'll take some of the earth from Denver, and each of you, we can't have a full kavora. They wouldn't allow us at Fairmont to have a full covering of the casket, but we'll do a symbolic. There will be a cement cover that goes on, so that will protect the coffin. And then perhaps on subsequent ventures down to North Carolina, you can bring some of that earth back and sprinkle it as well. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakaki, Hisham Adonai Vorach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yatzah etchem betzamo, v'zan v'chokeh etchem betuvo, v'mit etchem bedin, v'natah b'tochechen chayei olam. Baruch atah Adonai Dayan ha'emet. We praise you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who forms us in the divine image and nourishes and sustains us in goodness and causes us to be but mortal, and yet who has implanted immortal life within us. We praise you, O God, judge of truth. Atah gibor le'elam Adonai rav l'hoshia, mechapeh achayim b'chesed, mechayeh metim b'rachamim rabim. Somet dofim v'rofei cholim matir asarim, kayem emoto l'shnei afar. Michamocha ba'al geborot midom melach, melech b'mid u'mechayim atzmech Yeshua. Baruch atah Adonai noter b'tochenu chayei olam. Eternal is your might, O God. O life is your gift. Great is your power to save. With love you sustain the living, and with great compassion you give life to all. You send help to the falling and healing to the sick. You bring freedom to the captive and keep faith with those who sleep in the dust. We praise you, O God, who plants eternal life within us. For those who wish to be a part of the Torah, place a little bit of earth, please come forward. As Michael mentioned, it's not just memory. It is indeed perhaps even beyond DNA, RNA. Scientists will struggle for what exactly it is. Our ancestors knew that there was something that connected nishamot, the souls, one to the other, which is why we had the kriya for the children over the heart. You are made up of his stuff and mom's. There's no memory that can be gained or lost. It's rather just a part of who you are. And it's not just family and it's not just DNA, because everybody who had a loving connection with another person, that relationship has informed who we are. We have changed and grown because of those relationships. And so when we chant this prayer that you can find on page 4, the El Malay Rachamim, it speaks of the neshama, the soul, Yitzro B'tzro HaChayim Et Nishmato, that the soul will be bound up in the bond of God, of Chayim, of life, but also of Chayim, the living, with each and every one of you. You need only to pause and to think and to reflect, and you'll feel it forevermore. If you're able, please rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein B'Maromim Amse Menucha Nechon Al Kanfei Hashchina V'malot Kedoshim Tehorim Kezohar Rakia Masirim Et Nishmat Ephraim Hirsch Ben Moshe Benyamin V'Rachel Shalach Le'olamo Began Eden Menuchato Lachen Barachamim Yastirehu Besete Kanafab Leolamim Yitzro Bitzro Hashayim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato Yanuach B'Shalom Mishkavo Vinomar Amen. Let us say together in English, O God, exalted and full of compassion, we pray that you will grant perfect peace and eternal comfort in your sheltering presence to the soul of Ed Steinberg. God of mercy, protect his soul forever. May his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Adonai, you are his portion. May he rest in peace. Let us say, Amen. This Kaddish Yatom, the orphans Kaddish, the prayer of loss. It does not mention loss. It mentions rather a sanctification of life. And so how best to honor Ed's memory than by living life well. We say, Yit Gadol, Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, Be'alma Devara Cherute, Be'yamlich Malchute, Bechayechon, V'yameachon, V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, Vizman Kari, V'imru, Amen. Shemei Rabbah Mevorach, Leolam, Ul Almei, Almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitba'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei V'kurusha B'richu, Le'ela Minko Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechamata, Da'amiram Ba'alma, V'imru, Amen. Shalama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'akol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Osei Shalom B'moromav, V'yahasei Shalom, Aleinu, V'akol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. These final words, if we could share on page 6. And before we do so, I wanted to remind everyone that the family is welcoming back to Cindy and Dan's home from 4 to 6 visitation. There will be a service at 5. And again, the service of the Mincha is not a long service, so we can have plenty of time for sharing stories as well. And the address for their home was printed on the condolence message that went out to all Temple Sinai, as well as on Feldman's website as well. For the family, we say, for the ties of love that death cannot sever, for the companionship we shared along life's path, for those gifts of heart and mind which have now become a precious heritage. For all this and more, we are grateful. Now help us, O compassionate God, not to dwell on sorrow and pain. Help us instead to find within our hearts the courage to return to the tasks of life and its joys. Amen. If all the friends could come around the family now, come close, because yes, we say, Zichrono livracha, may his memory be a blessing. But there's another phrase that we share. And so your closeness, your embrace, if you could repeat after me these words which we say to the mourners. Hamakom yinachem etchem. Etchem betok sha'ar avalei Sion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you, along with all who mourn, in Zion and Jerusalem. The word for God in this case was hamakom, literally the place, because wherever you go, there'll be friends, there'll be loved ones. And may the strength and the goodness that you've received and given to your beloved Father, may that give you strength and comfort as well. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our service. Do you guys want to take the flowers? Okay, I can help you. It's in your car when you're ready. Yeah. Hey, Tom.
Yeah. That's right.
I can't look at you.
Oh, there he is. Hello. Hey, Tom. Good seeing you again.
Like, let me go short on each other. You're right.
Age 57 years. I love it. Hello.
How you doing? Good. Beautiful day. Celebrate his life. Yep. Yeah. I'm so glad that we got to spend a little time, That really meant a lot to me. Yeah. I mean, who knew? I thought, I didn't think that.
Was it on there?
Such a good idea. Such a good. Yeah. We want to see it too.
Just remember.
You just text it to yourself. Yeah, you guys.
Virtual attendance, take care of each other.